Hi, my name is Margarina. Currently, I'm taking diploma in medical technology laboratory. Today, I would like to talk about kings in Malaysia, which would include the background, the roles of Malay rulers, the roles of the Conference of Rulers, and the roles of Yang di-Pertuan Agong. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong, also known as the Supreme Head or the King, is the constitutional monarch and head of state of Malaysia. The office was established in 1957 when the Federation of Malaya gained independence from the United Kingdom. Malaysia is a constitutional monarchy with the elected monarch as head of state. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong is one of the few elected monarchs in the world. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong's role is that of a constitutional monarch. The Constitution of Malaysia and Acts of Parliament made in accordance with it define the extent of his powers as the head of state. These are divided into two categories: power exercised on the advice of the Prime Minister, another minister, the Cabinet, the Conference of Rulers, or some other officer or institution, and discretionary powers. The Constitution vests the executive power of the federal government in the monarch. However, with few exemptions, he is bound to exercise this power on the advice of the cabinet or a minister acting under the cabinet's general authority. Thus, in practice, most of the actual day-to-day work of governing is performed by the cabinet. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong has discretionary powers to choose who he wants as the Prime Minister if no party has won a majority vote and is not bound by the decision of the outgoing Prime Minister. It, however, does not afford him the right and authority to dismiss the Prime Minister. He also can dismiss or withhold consent to a request for the dissolution of Parliament. He may discontinue or dissolve Parliament, but he can only dissolve Parliament at the request of the Prime Minister. He can reject any new laws or amendments to existing laws, but if he still withhold permissions, it will automatically become law after 30 days from the initial submission to him. The background of Malay rulers. Tuanku Abdul Rahman. He was the first supreme head of state or Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaya of the Federation of Malaya. 8. Yang di-Pertuan Besar of Seri Menanti and second Yang di-Pertuan Besar of modern Negeri Sembilan. Sultan Hisamuddin Alam Shah. He was the second Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaya from 14 April to 1st of September 1960 and the sixth Sultan of Selangor between 1938 until 1942 and again from 1945 to 1960. Tuanku Syed Putra. He was the third Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaya and later of Malaysia from 21st September 1960 until 20 September 1965 and 6th Raja of Perlis. Sultan Ismail Nasiruddin Shah. He was the fourth Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaysia and the 16th Sultan of Terengganu. In 1940, he was appointed a minister of the Terengganu State Cabinet, having been made Tengku Sri Paduka Raja. In 1941, he became first-class magistrate and was promoted Terengganu State Secretary in 15 November 1941. Sultan Abdul Halim Muazzam Shah. He served the 5th Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaysia from 1970 to 1975 and as the 14th Yang di-Pertuan Agong from 2011 to 2016. He was the first person to reign at Yang di-Pertuan Agong twice as well as the oldest elected to the office. Immediately prior to his death, he was the second longest reigning living monarch in the world after Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom. Sultan Yahya Petra. He was the sixth Yang di-Pertuan Agong of Malaysia. Sultan Yahya Petra served as Deputy Yang Dipertuan Agong, the Federal Deputy King between 21st September 1970 until 20 September 1975. Sultan Ahmad Shah. He was the 5th modern Sultan of Pahang and also served as the 7th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia from 26 April 1979 to 25 April 1984. His abdication as Sultan was decided by the Royal Council at an extraordinary meeting on 11 January 2019. Sultan Iskandar. He was the 8th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia from 26 April 1984 to 25 April 1989. Was the 24th Sultan of Johor and the 4th Sultan of Modern Johor. Sultan Azlan Muhibbuddin Shah. He was the 34th Sultan of Perak and was the 9th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia. In 1965, he became the youngest person appointed to the High Court of Malaya, and in 1982, he became the youngest ever Lord President of the Federal Court, the country's highest judicial rank. Tuanku Jaafar. He was the 10th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia from 26 April 1994 until 25 April 1999 and the 10th Yang Dipertuan Besar of Negeri Sembilan. Sultan Salahuddin Abdulaziz Shah. He was the 11th Yang Dipertuan Agong at Malaysia and 8th Sultan of Selangor. Tuanku Syed Sirajuddin. He is the 7th and current Raja of Perlis, and he served as the 12th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia from 13 December 2001 to 12 December 2006, after the death of his father, who had been Raja since 1945 and was at that time the world's longest reigning monarch. Sultan Mizan Zainal Abidin. He is the 18th and current Sultan of Terengganu. He served as the 13th Yang Dipertuan Agong, the constitutional monarch of Malaysia from 2006 to 2011. He is Malay by ethnicity and an adherent of Sunni Islam. Sultan Muhammad Kelima. He is the current Sultan of Kelantan and served as the 15th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia. He was proclaimed Yang Dipertuan Agong on 13 December 2016. In an unprecedented move, Muhammad Kelima became the first Yang Dipertuan Agong to step down from the throne, effective 6 January 2019. Al-Sultan Abdullah Al-Hajj. He is the 16th Yang Dipertuan Agong of Malaysia and the 6th Sultan of Pahang. He was proclaimed as Sultan on 15 January 2019, succeeding his father, Sultan Ahmad Shah, whose abdication was decided at a Royal Council meeting on 11 January. The role function of Malay rulers. Each of the 9 rulers served as the head of state of his own state, as well as the head of the religion of Islam in his state. As with other constitutional monarchs around the world, the rulers do not participate in the actual governance in their state. Instead, each of them is bound by convention to act on the advice of the head of government of his state, known as Menteri Besar. However, the ruler of each state has discretionary powers in appointing the Menteri Besar that commands a majority in the state legislative assembly and refusing a dissolution of the state assembly when requested by the Menteri Besar. The powers of the monarch have been restricted over time, although there is debate about the precise limits of their powers. The Yang Dipertuan Agong is the federal head of state. His symbolic roles include being the commander-in-chief of the Malaysian Armed Force and carrying out diplomatic functions such as receiving foreign diplomats and representing Malaysia on state visits. The Yang Dipertuan Agong is the head of Islam in his own state. The 4 states without ruler includes Penang, Malacca, Sabah and Sarawak, and the Federal Territories. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong is required to delegate all his state powers to a region, except for the role of head of Islam. Similar to other rulers, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong acts on the advice of the Prime Minister and has discretionary powers in appointing the Prime Minister that commands a majority in the Dewan Rakyat, the lower house of the Parliament, and refusing a dissolution of the Parliament. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong also appoints the Yang di-Pertuan Negeri, the ceremonial governors for the 4 states without rulers, on the advice of the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister of the state. A unique feature of the constitutional monarchy in Malaysia is the Conference of Rulers, consisting of the 9 rulers and the 4 Yang di-Pertuan Negeri. The conference convenes triennially to discuss various issues related to state and national policy. The most important role of the conference is to elect the Yang di-Pertuan Agong every 5 years or when a vacancy occurs. Only the rulers participate in the election of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, as well as discussion related to rulers, privilege, and religious observance. The conference's other role in the federal governance of the country is to give consent to amendments of certain entrance provisions of the federal constitutions, namely those pertaining to the status of the rulers, the special privilege of the Bumiputra, the status of the Malay language as the national language, and the status of Islam as the religion of the Federation. The roles or function of the Conference of Rulers. The Conference of Rulers is not only supreme but also unique, as it is the only such institution in the world. After the country gained independence, the Conference of Rulers was established in accordance with Article 38 of the Federal Constitution. The function and duties of the Conference of Rulers, as provided in Federal Constitution, are as follows. Number 1. Electing. In accordance with the provisions of the third schedule, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong and the Timbalan Yang di-Pertuan Agong. Number 2. Agreeing or disagreeing to the extension of any religious act, observance, or ceremonies to the Federation as a whole. Number 3. Consenting or withholding consent to any law and making or giving advice on any appointment which under this constitution requires the consent of the conference or is to be made by or after consultations with the conference. Number 4. Appointing members of the special court under clause 1 of Article 182. Number 5. Granting pardons, reprieve and respite or remitting, suspending or commuting sentence under clause 12 of Article 42, and may deliberate on matters of national policy, for example changes in immigration policy, and any other matter that it deems fit. When the conference deliberates on matter of national policy, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong shall be accompanied by the Prime Minister and the other rulers, and the Yang di-Pertuan Negeri by their Chief Minister. No law directly affecting the privileged position, honors, or dignities of the ruler shall be passed without the consent of the Conference of Rulers. The Conference of Rulers shall be consulted before any change is made to the policy affecting administrative action under Article 153. The Conference of Rulers also appoints a representative to sit on the Armed Forces Council pursuant to Article 137 of the Federal Constitution. Lastly, a representative to sit on the Board of Governors of Dewan Bahasa and Pustaka in accordance with the relevant Act. The roles of Yang di-Pertuan Agong. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong's role is that of a constitutional monarch. The Constitution of Malaysia and Acts of Parliament made in accordance with it define the extent of his powers as the head of state. These are divided into 2 categories: power exercised on the advice of the Prime Minister and other minister, the Cabinet, the Conference of Rulers, or some other officer or institution, and discretionary powers. The Constitution vests the executive power of the federal government in the monarch. However, with few exemptions, he is bound to exercise this power on the advice of the cabinet or a minister acting under the cabinet's general authority. Thus, in practice, most of the actual day-to-day work of governing is performed by the cabinet. The discretionary powers of the Yang di-Pertuan Agong pertain chiefly to appointing the Prime Minister, withholding consent to dissolve Parliament, and calling meetings with the Conference of Rulers. Concerned solely with the privilege, position, honours and dignities of their Royal Highness. Under the Westminster system, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong is expected to appoint a Prime Minister who will command the confidence of a majority of the Dewan Rakyat, the elected lower house of Parliament. Should the Prime Minister be or become unacceptable, he may be forced out by a vote of no confidence, which would require the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to appoint someone else as Prime Minister or dissolve Parliament for an election. Conventionally, the Prime Minister is the head of the party with a majority in Parliament. This was the Barisan Nasional Coalition from independence in 1957 until 2018, when the Pakatan Harapan Coalition took office. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong renews the appointment of a Prime Minister after every general election until the minister decide to step down. The Yang di-Pertuan Agong has discretionary powers to choose who he wants as the Prime Minister if no party has won majority vote, and is not bound by the decision of the outgoing Prime Minister. It, however, does not afford him the right and authority to dismiss the Prime Minister. He also can dismiss or withhold consent to a request for the dissolution of Parliament. He may discontinue or dissolve Parliament, but he can only dissolve Parliament at the request of the Prime Minister. He can reject any new laws or amendments to existing laws, but if he still withhold permissions, it will automatically become law after 30 days from the initial submission to him. That's all from me. Hope you guys enjoy, and thank you.